I never expected to discover that necklace in his pocket, one I never received. When he walked in with his pregnant colleague, I was ready. The look on his face when my attorney appeared with those papers. Let's just say some retainer fees are worth every penny. The laughter at our annual family reunion suddenly died when Charles walked in with a woman I'd never seen before. Her baby bump was unmistakable beneath her floral sundress. "Everyone," my husband announced with his arm around her waist, "I'd like you to meet Kayla." Before anyone could react, the front door opened again. "Perfect timing," I said, standing up with a calm I didn't know I possessed. "Since Charles has decided to make introductions, I'd like you all to meet Patrick Reynolds, my attorney. He's here with the divorce papers and a paternity test order." The look on Charles's face was worth every penny of Patrick's retainer fee. I never planned to turn our family reunion into a public exposure of Charles's double life. 8 years of marriage had built what I thought was an unshakable foundation of trust between us. But sometimes the most devastating betrayals happen right before our eyes, while we're too busy believing in promises to notice the warning signs. Charles and I met during my final year of graduate school. I was 26, finishing my master's in environmental science, while he was 32, and already established as an architectural engineer at a prestigious firm downtown. Our meeting seemed almost scripted from a romance novel, both reaching for the same book at a crowded bookstore, coffee that turned into dinner, and conversations that flowed effortlessly, until the cafe staff politely informed us they were closing. What attracted me to Charles initially wasn't just his striking blue eyes or the confident way he carried himself. It was his apparent thoughtfulness, the way he remembered small details about my research interests, how he sent handwritten notes after our dates, his genuine interest in my dreams and ambitions. "You're different, Abigail," he would say. "You see the world in ways I never considered." That kind of admiration is intoxicating when you're young and still uncertain of your place in the world. We married 2 years later in a sunset ceremony at his family's lakeside property. The Morgan family welcomed me warmly, his mother, Audrey, embracing me as the daughter she never had. His father, Claude, beaming with pride as Charles recited his vows. "I promise to be faithful, honest, and true," Charles had said, looking directly into my eyes. "To build a life of trust and transparency with you for all our days." Words that would eventually hollow out with irony. The first 5 years of our marriage unfolded according to the careful plan we'd created together. We bought a craftsman-style home in the historic district, adopting a golden retriever named Edison, who quickly became the center of our shared universe. Charles's career flourished. He made partner at his firm by 35, while I established myself as an environmental consultant specializing in sustainable urban development. We complemented each other perfectly, or so I believed. Charles handled our investments and long-term financial planning. I managed our day-to-day life and maintained our social connections. "We're a power couple," our friends would joke at dinner parties, watching how seamlessly we operated together, finishing each other's sentences and anticipating each other's needs. Charles would smile at these comments, squeezing my hand under the table while exchanging a private glance that made me feel like the most fortunate woman alive. "Team Morgan," he would toast, clinking his glass against mine. Our routine had a comfortable predictability: morning runs with Edison, Sunday brunches at Maple Street Cafe, summer weekends sailing on Lake Windermere, and the annual Morgan family reunion at the lake house, a tradition stretching back 3 generations. Charles's grandparents had purchased the property in the 1960s, and it had become the gathering place for extended families scattered across 5 states. If there were warning signs during those years, I was too enamored with our picture-perfect life to notice them. The occasional late nights at the office I never questioned. The business trips that gradually increased in frequency seemed like a natural progression of his success. The decreased interest in our intimate life I attributed to work stress and the inevitable dulling of early marital passion. "You're so trusting, Abby," my friend Tiffany commented once after Charles called to say he'd be missing our dinner plans due to an emergency client meeting. I'd be tracking Arnold's phone by now. I laughed off her suspicion, defending Charles without hesitation. "That's the difference between your marriage and mine," I replied with unearned confidence. "We don't need to check up on each other. We have absolute trust." The irony of those words would return to haunt me many times in the months to come. The shift in our marriage wasn't sudden, but gradual, like water slowly eroding stone until the foundation weakens. Charles began withdrawing emotionally, spending more time on his phone and taking calls in another room. Our conversations became superficial, focusing on logistics rather than connection. When I attempted to discuss the distance growing between us, he deflected with practiced ease. "It's just a busy season, Abby," he would say, kissing my forehead dismissively. "The Westlake project is demanding everything from me right now. It'll settle down soon." I believed him because believing him was easier than confronting the alternative. I had built my entire adult life around our partnership, our shared dreams for the future, our plans to start a family once his partnership was secured and my consulting business was established. Questioning Charles meant questioning everything I thought I knew about our life together. The Morgan family reunion was scheduled for the first weekend in June, a tradition that had continued uninterrupted for 35 years through weddings, funerals, economic downturns, and even a pandemic. This year would mark our 8th reunion as a couple. And despite the growing tension between us, I found myself looking forward to the familiar comfort of family traditions. Perhaps surrounded by loved ones, the Charles I had fallen in love with would re-emerge from behind whatever stress was consuming him. "Are you sure you can make it this year?" I asked him cautiously over breakfast, 3 weeks before the event. "I know the Westlake project is in its final phase." Charles looked up from his phone, a strange expression flickering across his face before his features settled into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Of course I'll be there," he replied, reaching for my hand across the table. "I wouldn't miss it for anything. Family comes first, always has, always will." I nodded, relief washing over me as I squeezed his fingers. His wedding band caught the morning light, gleaming gold against his skin, a circle unbroken, a promise still intact. At least, that's what I chose to believe for a few weeks longer. "I'm heading out early next Monday for the Dallas meeting," he mentioned casually as he stood to leave. "Probably be gone 3 days, back Thursday at the latest." "I'll miss you," I said automatically. The phrase a ritual between us for years. Charles hesitated at the door, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "I'll miss you too, Abby," he said softly. Then he was gone, the front door clicking shut behind him. I couldn't have known then that this mundane Monday morning would be the last normal moment of my marriage. The final exchange before everything I believed about Charles Morgan and our life together would collapse like a house built on sand. I never meant to discover Charles's secret. That Monday after he left for Dallas, I was working from home, finalizing a sustainability report for the city council. Edison had been acting restless all morning. His golden retriever intuition, perhaps sensing the invisible fractures already forming in our household. His pitiful whines and expectant looks toward his leash finally convinced me to take a break and walk him to the dog park 6 blocks from our house. Our home, a craftsman-style restoration we had lovingly renovated over 3 years, felt unusually quiet that morning. Without Charles's presence, the spaces seemed to expand. Every creak and settling noise magnified in the stillness. As I moved through rooms we had carefully decorated together, I felt an odd disconnect, as if I were walking through a museum exhibit of someone else's life rather than my own home. As I reached for Edison's leash hanging in the hallway closet, I noticed one of Charles's suit jackets had fallen from its hanger. His navy Hugo Boss, the one I'd given him for his last birthday, selecting it precisely because the shade matched his eyes. It lay crumpled on the closet floor, something so unlike Charles, who meticulously maintained his professional wardrobe. Bending to pick it up, I felt something solid in the inside pocket. A small square box the size of my palm. My heart skipped a beat, then accelerated. Our 9th anniversary was still 2 months away, but Charles had always been one for advance planning, often hiding gifts weeks ahead of special occasions. A tender warmth spread through me at the thought of his thoughtfulness, even amid his increasingly busy schedule. With a smile, I opened the navy velvet box, already crafting an expression of surprise I'd wear when he eventually presented it. I imagined the story we'd tell at dinner parties, how I'd accidentally discovered my anniversary gift while he was away on business, how I'd pretended surprise when he finally gave it to me. Another perfect anecdote for our seemingly perfect life. But inside wasn't a gift meant for me. Nestled against the dark fabric was a delicate silver pendant shaped like a daisy with a small diamond at its center. The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly expensive, but with a youthful, feminine design, unlike anything Charles had ever selected for me. Attached was a tiny card with Charles's unmistakable architectural handwriting for Kayla to remind you of our first weekend. Love, always, see. I stared at the necklace, the name Kayla, swimming before my eyes as my vision blurred with sudden tears. The pendant dangled from my fingers, catching the late morning light that streamed through our front windows. The windows I had insisted on enlarging during the renovation to let more light into our life. The irony wasn't lost on me as illumination of a different sort flooded my consciousness. My mind frantically searched for an explanation. A colleague's retirement gift, perhaps? But love always and our first weekend weren't phrases used for professional relationships. A cousin's daughter, a niece's graduation present. I mentally catalogued every female relative or friend named Kayla and came up empty. And Charles had never mentioned anyone named Kayla in his personal or professional circles. Edison whined at my feet, his warm body pressing against my legs as if offering comfort. The dog park was forgotten as I carefully returned the box to his suit pocket. With trembling hands I couldn't bear to close it, to hide away this evidence as if I hadn't seen it. Nor could I confront the full implications of what I had discovered. I sat on the edge of our bed, the king-sized platform bed Charles and I had picked out together during our 3rd year of marriage, joking about needing space for future children to crawl in during Sunday morning cuddles. The same bed where just last night I had kissed him goodbye before his supposed trip to Dallas. My body remembered the familiar weight of his arms around me, the scent of his cologne, the casual "see you Thursday" that now seemed laden with hidden meaning. It could be nothing, I whispered to myself, though the hollow feeling in my chest suggested otherwise. There must be an explanation. Edison placed his head in my lap, brown eyes gazing up with canine concern. I stroked his soft fur mechanically, grateful for his unconditional presence as my mind sorted through recent memories with new awareness. Even as I tried to rationalize the discovery, another part of my mind, the analytical environmental scientist who assessed data and evidence for a living, was already cataloging other recent anomalies. The passwords changed on our shared accounts for security reasons. The weekend conference in Portland he'd been vague about. The new cologne I didn't select, and the growing collection of late-night client calls that required privacy. Small inconsistencies I had dismissed individually, now aligned into a pattern too coherent to ignore. The foundation of trust I had built my marriage upon developed hairline fractures before my eyes, spreading like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Edison nudged my hand with his nose, bringing me back to the present moment. I reached for my phone, nearly calling Charles before stopping myself. What would I say? Accusations based on a necklace would only give him time to construct explanations, to weave more elaborate fictions to cover the truth. If there was something to find, and my instincts screamed that there was, I needed more concrete evidence. Instead, I called Tiffany, my oldest friend who had stood beside me at my wedding and who had, on several occasions, made subtle remarks about Charles's behavior that I had defensively dismissed. "Can you come over?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "And don't tell anyone I called." "I'll be there in 30, she replied without hesitation, the background noise suggesting she was already gathering her keys. While waiting for Tiffany, I paced through our house, seeing it with new eyes. The framed photos documenting our life together suddenly seemed staged. Charles and me in Bali on our honeymoon, skiing in Aspen last winter, at his firm's Christmas party, where his hand rested possessively on my lower back. Had he been genuinely present in these moments, or merely performing the role of devoted husband? How long had the performance been underway? I found myself at his desk in our shared office, fingers hovering over the drawer pulls. We had never invaded each other's privacy. It was an unspoken rule of our marriage. Charles had his spaces, I had mine, and we respected those boundaries. But if those boundaries had already been violated by deception, did the old rules still apply? Before I could decide, Tiffany's car pulled into the driveway, and Edison's excited barking announced her arrival. "What's happened?" she asked the moment. I opened the door, reading crisis in my expression with the accuracy of decades-long friendship. I led her to the kitchen, mechanically preparing coffee while recounting my discovery of the necklace. The normalcy of measuring coffee grounds and heating water provided an anchor as the story spilled out. "You need to check your phone records," Tiffany said firmly, sitting at my kitchen table 90 minutes later, her 3rd cup of coffee cooling before her. "And bank statements, credit cards, anything financial." I shook my head, still resistant to fully accepting what the necklace suggested. "That feels invasive." Tiffany leaned forward, her expression serious, her voice gentle but firm. "You found another woman's jewelry in your husband's pocket. This isn't the time for privacy concerns." She was right, of course. The researcher in me knew that. Data would provide clarity where emotions couldn't. While Charles handled our investments, I managed our household accounts and had access to all our shared statements. With Tiffany beside me for moral support, I logged into our shared cell phone account, the screen illuminated with months of call history, text message logs, and data usage. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual, just pages of numbers and timestamps that documented the mundane communications of daily life. But as I filtered the data to display only Charles's line, patterns emerged with alarming clarity. The evidence was painfully obvious once I looked for it. For the past 7 months, the same phone number appeared dozens of times per day in Charles's call history. Early morning calls, late night texts, weekend communications, when he claimed to be golfing with clients or meeting with contractors. The number wasn't saved in his contacts that synced to our shared account. Just 10 anonymous digits that had become the most frequent connection in my husband's life. 7 months, I whispered, scrolling through page after page of calls, at least 7 months of daily contact. Tiffany squeezed my shoulder, her presence a silent support as we continued our digital excavation of my marriage. Our joint credit card statements revealed another layer of deception. Dinners at restaurants Charles had never mentioned. Intimate, expensive establishments I'd heard of, but we'd never visited together. Hotel charges in our own city on nights he was supposedly working late, including the Four Seasons downtown where he claimed their firm hosted out-of-town clients. A weekend at a vineyard resort 3 hours north during his professional development conference, and most damning of all, 3 separate charges from Hartwell's, an upscale jewelry store downtown, including one from just 3 days ago for $520, approximately the cost of a silver and diamond pendant. He's not even trying to hide it, I said numbly, staring at the screen as evidence of Charles's parallel life accumulated before me. All this time, it's been in plain sight. Because he never thought you'd look, Tiffany replied, a hint of restrained anger in her voice. He counted on your trust. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. The very quality Charles had once praised in me, my capacity for trust, my willingness to believe the best in people, had become the blindfold he had used to conduct his deception right under my nose. Felt my shock beginning to crystallize into something harder and colder, a clarity that pushed through the initial fog of confusion and hurt. I need to know who she is, I said, reaching for my laptop. This Kayla person. Are you sure that's necessary right now? Tiffany asked cautiously. Maybe you should just confront Charles first. I shook my head, my resolve strengthening. No. If I confront him now, he'll just create stories to explain it all away. He's had months of practice constructing lies. I'd be at a disadvantage. I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with before I face him. The search wasn't difficult. Charles's architectural firm maintained a detailed website with staff profiles and project teams, highlighting their work and the professionals behind it. It took less than 5 minutes to find her. Kayla Winters, junior architect, transferred from the Seattle office 8 months ago. Her professional headshot showed a woman about 5 years younger than me, with striking auburn hair and confident green eyes. According to her bio, she specialized in sustainable design integration, an interest Charles and I had once shared in the early years of our marriage. She works with him, I said flatly, turning the screen so Tiffany could see. 8 months at the same firm. My friend studied the photo, her expression carefully neutral. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? The path forward had suddenly become as unclear as my past had become suspect. Hours ago, I had been a happily married woman building a life with a man I trusted completely. Now I sat surrounded by evidence of his systematic betrayal, unsure whether to scream, cry, or continue my methodical dismantling of the illusion he had constructed. I'm not going to do anything yet. I closed the laptop with a decisive click. I need more information before I make any decisions. Tiffany looked concerned. Abby, isn't this already enough? The calls, the expenses, the jewelry. What more do you need? I stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at our perfectly landscaped yard. Another shared project Charles and I had designed together, planting each tree and shrub with detailed discussions about how they would mature alongside our future, children playing beneath them. The Japanese maple we'd planted on our 5th anniversary was just reaching the height we'd projected, its delicate red leaves catching the afternoon light. How much of that shared vision had been genuine for Charles? Had he already been planning his exit strategy even as we planted trees meant to witness decades of our life together? I need to know if this is just an affair, I said quietly, or if he's building a whole separate life that I know nothing about. I need to understand exactly what I'm losing before I decide how to respond. The distinction mattered to me. An affair, while devastating, might be a temporary lapse, a midlife crisis, something potentially survivable with extensive therapy and rebuilding of trust. But if Charles was constructing an entire parallel existence, Making long-term plans that excluded me while maintaining our marriage as a convenient fiction, that would be a different category of betrayal entirely. Turning back to Tiffany, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The calm that comes not from peace, but from absolute clarity of purpose. Charles won't be back from Dallas until Thursday. That gives me 3 days to find out exactly who Kayla Winters is to my husband, and exactly what kind of future he's been planning without me. As I spoke the words aloud, a plan began forming in my mind, methodical steps to uncover the full extent of Charles's deception before deciding how to respond. The environmental scientist in me, trained to gather comprehensive data before drawing conclusions, would approach this personal earthquake with the same disciplined analysis I applied to ecological systems. "I'm staying with you tonight, Tiffany," declared, not a question but a statement of fact. "You shouldn't be alone right now." I started to protest but realized she was right. The house suddenly felt like a museum of falsehoods. Every room, every piece of furniture, every photograph a potential repository for memories now tainted by doubt. The thought of sleeping alone in the bed Charles and I shared made my skin crawl. "Thank you," I said simply. As the afternoon light faded into evening, Edison settled between us on the living room sofa, while we formulated a plan for the days ahead. What had begun as a simple trip to walk the dog had transformed into the first day of a new reality. One where I would need all my strength and clarity to navigate the wreckage of what I had believed was a solid marriage. What I couldn't have known then was just how complete his parallel life had become, or that the family reunion just 2 weeks away would become the stage for its spectacular unraveling. After Tiffany left the following morning, I spent the day in a strange state of hyper-focus. The initial shock had transformed into something else, a cold analytical determination that felt both foreign and familiar. As an environmental scientist, I was trained to gather data, analyze patterns, and form conclusions based on evidence rather than emotion. Now I would apply those same skills to understanding the extent of my husband's deception. The house felt different now, tainted, as if Charles's lies had seeped into the very walls we had painted together. I moved through rooms once filled with comfort, now laden with questions. Had he spoken to her on the phone while sitting on our living room couch? Had he texted her from the kitchen island where we shared morning coffee? Every space held potential contamination. I started my investigation with social media. Charles and I had always maintained a minimal online presence, a mutual decision based on privacy concerns and professional discretion. My accounts were primarily for keeping in touch with college friends and former colleagues, while Charles used his sparingly for networking and firm-related announcements. But Kayla Winters was from a different generation, one that documented life more openly. Her Instagram account was set to private, but her LinkedIn profile offered professional insights. She'd graduated from the University of Washington 5 years ago with honors in architectural design, worked at a Seattle firm for 3 years, then transferred to Charles' company 8 months ago. The timeline aligned perfectly with the beginning of the mysterious phone calls. I downloaded her professional headshot, studying it with clinical detachment. She was objectively beautiful. Auburn hair falling in soft waves around a heart-shaped face, green eyes bright with confidence, smile suggesting both intelligence and warmth. The kind of woman who turned heads when she entered a room. Was that what had attracted Charles? Simple physical appeal? What struck me most, however, was her specialization, sustainable urban integration. This had been my passion, the very subject that had animated many dinner conversations with Charles during our early years together. We had spent countless evenings debating the merits of various ecological approaches to urban development, his architectural perspective blending with my environmental science background, in ways that had felt intellectually stimulating and emotionally connecting. Had he sought out someone who reflected parts of me? Or was it merely coincidence that his affair partner specialized in the very field that had once been our shared interest? The thought sent an unexpected pang through me. Not just betrayal of our marriage vows, but a peculiar theft of something I'd considered uniquely ours. I closed the laptop, suddenly needing physical distance from these discoveries. Edison followed me to the back porch where I sat watching the garden Charles and I had cultivated together. Native plants, arranged to attract local pollinators, a small pond system we'd installed to demonstrate water conservation techniques for his clients. Even our landscaping choices now seemed like artifacts from a relationship built on quicksand. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay in our bed, a space that suddenly felt contaminated, and stared at the ceiling, mentally cataloging every business trip, late night and weekend absence over the past 8 months. How many had been legitimate? How many had been with her? The Dallas trip supposedly happening now. Was he even in Texas? Or was Dallas a convenient fiction covering 3 days with Kayla? By morning I had formed a plan. Charles believed I would be busy with client meetings all day, meetings I would now reschedule. Instead, I would conduct reconnaissance at his office. Not to confront, not yet, but to observe. To gather intelligence on what appeared to be my husband's second life. I dressed carefully in a charcoal pantsuit I rarely wore, selected precisely because Charles had never seen me in it. I styled my hair differently, pulling it back into a sleek chignon instead of my usual loose waves. I added oversized sunglasses and a burgundy lipstick shade I'd purchased on a whim but never worn. Not an elaborate disguise, but enough to avoid immediate recognition by anyone who might know me as Charles's wife. I had visited his office building only a handful of times over the years, usually for holiday parties or special events. The 30-story glass tower housed several firms, with Charles's architectural company occupying floors 19 through 22. I knew his corner office faced east, overlooking the river, a prime location reflecting his senior status within the firm. Positioned myself at a cafe across the street with a clear view of the main entrance, ordered a coffee I couldn't taste, and opened a book I wouldn't read. Then I waited, feeling simultaneously like a stranger to myself and more authentically present than I had been in months. The deception required for this surveillance operation felt justified by the greater deception I was uncovering. The morning crowd ebbed and flowed, professionals hurrying to meetings, couriers delivering packages, groups emerging for early lunch, breaks. I recognized a few of Charles's colleagues from holiday parties and firm events, noting their arrivals and departures with detached interest. At 12:17 I spotted them. Charles emerged from the revolving doors, laughing at something being said by the auburn-haired woman beside him, Kayla Winters, unmistakable from her profile photo. Even from across the street, their body language spoke volumes. The casual way his hand rested on her lower back as they navigated the sidewalk. The intimate space between them, not colleagues, not friends, but lovers completely at ease in each other's presence. A sharp pain lanced through my chest, surprising in its intensity. Until this moment, my husband's infidelity had been an intellectual problem. Evidence to gather, patterns to analyze. Now watching him guide another woman with the same protective gesture he had once used with me, the emotional reality crashed through my carefully constructed defenses. I forced myself to remain seated, to continue the charade of casual coffee drinker while my marriage disintegrated before my eyes. Charles and Kayla walked to a bistro 2 blocks away, taking a table near the window, a cruel gift to my surveillance operation. Through my zoom lens I captured several photos of them together, including a moment when his hand reached across the table to rest on hers, when he brushed a strand of hair from her face, with the tender familiarity that comes from intimate knowledge of another person. Their easiness together suggested a relationship far more established than a casual affair. They moved in harmony, anticipated each other's needs, shared private jokes that illuminated their faces with matching expressions of delight. I was witnessing not the awkward excitement of a new affair but the comfortable rhythms of an established relationship. I followed them back to the office building after lunch, then waited again. At 5:45 they emerged together and walked to the parking garage. Charles helped her into his car, the silver Audi I had helped him select 3 years ago, before driving away. Not toward our home, but in the opposite direction. I followed at a careful distance, thankful for light traffic that allowed me to maintain visual contact without risking detection. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the parking area of an upscale apartment complex in Riverside Heights, a development I recognized from Charles's firm's portfolio. They had designed these luxury apartments 2 years ago, and Charles had proudly shown me the plans, describing the sustainable features and community spaces incorporated into the design. Now I watched as he and Kayla entered the building together, his hand again resting possessively at the small of her back. The weight of understanding settled over me. This wasn't merely an after-work visit. This had the unmistakable feeling of returning home. The rational part of my brain had expected this. The evidence had clearly pointed to an ongoing relationship. But witnessing it firsthand, seeing my husband of 8 years casually conducting a parallel life in broad daylight, was a different category of pain altogether. It was no longer a suspicion, but a witnessed reality. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, unable to drive away, unable to process the finality of what I had seen. The spring evening faded into dusk, lights illuminating windows throughout the apartment complex. On the third floor, a particular unit brightened, silhouettes moving behind gauzy curtains, two figures moving with the synchronicity of people accustomed to sharing space. When I finally drove home, the house that had once represented security now felt like an elaborate prop in a performance I hadn't known I was part of. I methodically documented everything I had observed, adding the photographs to a secure cloud folder I'd created that morning. I renamed the folder Evidence Without Irony, the scientist in me still needing to catalog and classify even as my personal world collapsed. I then called my sister, who lived 3 hours away in Portland. Unlike Tiffany, who had witnessed too many of my life's upheavals to maintain complete objectivity, my sister Rebecca had always been the practical voice in my life, less emotional but unfailingly reliable in crisis. "I need a lawyer," I told her without preamble when she answered. Someone discreet but aggressive. "Abby, what's happening?" The alarm in her voice was palpable through the phone. "Are you in trouble?" "Charles is having an affair," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice remained. "I need legal advice before I confront him." There was a moment of silence before Rebecca responded, not with expressions of shock or dismay, but with the immediate practicality I had counted on. "I know someone, Patrick Reynolds. He handled my college roommate's divorce last year when her husband pulled something similar. Very effective, very discreet. Let me make a call." While waiting for her to arrange the consultation, I wandered through our home, newly aware of all the Charles and Abigail artifacts surrounding me. Wedding photos on the mantel, vacation souvenirs displayed on bookshelves, the antique writing desk he'd surprised me with on our 5th anniversary, knowing I'd admired it months earlier in a shop window. Each item now carried a double meaning, both the original memory and the new question of whether his participation had been genuine or performance. I paused at our home office doorway, staring at Charles's desk. With new awareness, I noticed the careful arrangement of items. Nothing personal left visible, everything locked away in drawers or filed in cabinets. How had I not recognized the deliberate compartmentalization reflected in his workspace? The physical manifestation of his separate lives was right there in our home, hidden in plain sight. Rebecca called back within the hour. "Tomorrow at 9 a.m., Patrick's office downtown. He's making a special arrangement to see you before his regular appointments." She hesitated before adding, "Abby, are you sure about this? No chance it's a misunderstanding." I described what I had witnessed that day, Charles and Kayla together, the apartment, the obvious intimacy of their interactions. "It's been going on for months, Becca. There's no misunderstanding possible. Do you need me to come?" she offered. "I can be there by midnight." The offer tempted me. The prospect of not facing this alone held powerful appeal. But Rebecca had 2 young children, a demanding job, and a husband currently traveling for work. "No. But thank you, I need to handle this myself. Just knowing you're available if I need you helps." After hanging up, I made one more call to my primary care physician, requesting the first available appointment for a full panel of STI testing. The clinical necessity of this step drove home the physical reality of Charles's betrayal in ways I hadn't fully processed. Our intimacy, which I had believed exclusive and safe, was now suspect, another domain requiring investigation and verification. Patrick Reynolds agreed to see me the following morning. His office occupied a converted Victorian in a quiet part of downtown, the interior surprisingly modern despite the historic exterior. The man himself was in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and the focused attention of someone who missed nothing. He greeted me with a firm handshake and direct eye contact that conveyed competence without unnecessary warmth. "Tell me everything," he said after brief introductions, gesturing me to a chair opposite his sleek glass desk. "And I mean everything." Surprises benefit no one in these situations. For the next hour, I outlined my discoveries chronologically: the necklace, the phone records, the credit card statements, my observations from the previous day. As I spoke, Patrick took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions about our finances, property, and the timeline of events. His expression remained neutral throughout, neither expressing shock at Charles's behavior, nor offering sympathy for my situation. His professional detachment was exactly what I needed. Emotion would come later, but now I required clarity and strategy. "Based on what you've shared, we're looking at a fairly straightforward case of infidelity," he said when I finished. "However, there's a practical matter to consider. Oregon is a no-fault divorce state. Courts don't generally factor infidelity into property division unless marital assets were used to support the affair. Which they were, I interjected, pulling out the printouts of credit card statements I had organized chronologically. The jewelry, the hotels, the dinners, all on our joint accounts. And I suspect the apartment is being subsidized through our funds as well, though I don't have proof yet. Patrick nodded, examining the financial documents with practiced efficiency. That helps. But what we really need is a complete financial picture, accounts, investments, property, anything that might be moved or hidden. This was the challenge. While I managed our household accounts, Charles handled our investments and long-term financial planning. I had basic knowledge but not complete access to all our financial instruments. Our division of labor, once a point of pride in our efficient partnership, now revealed itself as a vulnerability. I'll need to investigate further, I admitted. Charles keeps most investment documents in his home office. I can access them while he's away. Do it quickly, Patrick advised, leaning forward slightly. Once a spouse suspects their partner is considering divorce, assets have a way of becoming difficult to track. Money gets moved, accounts get closed, paperwork disappears. Time is not your ally here. He handed me a folder containing documents to complete, financial disclosure forms, a detailed marital history questionnaire, asset inventory sheets. Fill these out as completely as possible before our next meeting. The more information we have, the stronger position we'll be in when negotiations begin. I left his office with a strange sense of relief mixed with apprehension. The legal consultation had transformed my personal crisis into a procedural challenge. Still painful, but now with defined parameters and potential solutions. Patrick's matter-of-fact approach provided a framework for the chaos of emotions I had been navigating since finding the necklace. That evening, I received an unexpected text from Tiffany. You need to see this. Attached was a screenshot from a private community Facebook group dedicated to local architects and designers. It showed a post from 2 days ago, a photo of Charles and Kayla at a local farmer's market, his arm around her waist, both smiling broadly at the camera. The caption read, "Congratulations to Charles and Kayla on their baby news. So excited for you both. Future dad, our baby on board." My world tilted on its axis as I stared at the image. This wasn't merely an affair, a temporary lapse in judgment or midlife crisis. Charles and Kayla were expecting a child together, a child he had never mentioned, a future he was planning while maintaining our marriage as a convenient fiction. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, suddenly lightheaded as the implications cascaded through my consciousness. Children had been part of our plan, a plan Charles had consistently postponed with reasonable-sounding explanations about career timing and financial stability. Just one more year, he'd said the last time. We discussed it, citing the partnership track at his firm and the benefits of waiting until we'd built sufficient savings. We want to do this right, don't we? All while he was creating a family with someone else. The comments below the post confirmed what the caption suggested. Multiple people offering congratulations, someone mentioning 4 months along and glowing, another asking about nursery plans. This wasn't recent news. This was an established pregnancy that Charles had been celebrating openly with a separate social circle, all while sleeping beside me each night. I zoomed in on the image, studying Kayla more carefully. The loose dress she wore concealed her figure, but standing at an angle, a subtle curve was indeed visible. A small but unmistakable baby bump I had missed during my surveillance. 4 months pregnant, the timing aligned with our anniversary trip to Cannon Beach, where Charles had been unusually attentive, bringing me breakfast in bed and reminiscing about our early years together. Had he known then? Had he been celebrating our past while actively building a future with someone else? My husband wasn't just having an affair. He was creating a replacement family. The Morgan family reunion was 10 days away. In that moment, staring at irrefutable evidence of Charles's complete betrayal, a plan began forming in my mind. He had chosen to live a double life, maintaining our marriage, while building a future with another woman and their child. He had made me an unwitting character in his deception, a placeholder to be discarded when convenient. Perhaps it was time he experienced the public unmasking he so richly deserved. I called Patrick Reynolds again despite the late hour. "I need to change our approach," I said when he answered. "And I need to know if you're available for a family event on the June." "That's unusual," he replied, professional curiosity evident in his tone. "What did you have in mind?" As I outlined my emerging plan, the emotional fog that had surrounded me since discovering the necklace began to lift. In its place came a clear-eyed determination, not just to end my marriage with dignity, but to ensure Charles faced the full consequences of his choices in front of those whose opinion he valued most. "It's unorthodox," Patrick acknowledged when I finished explaining, "but legally sound, provided we file the necessary paperwork beforehand. Are you certain this is how you want to proceed? Public confrontations can be unpredictable." "I'm certain," I replied, a cold clarity settling over me. Charles has been living two separate lives. He deserves two very public endings. As I ended the call, I glanced again at the farmer's market photo, at Charles's arm possessively wrapped around Kayla's waist, at the proud smile of an expectant father. For 8 years, I had believed I knew this man completely. Now I recognized him as a stranger wearing my husband's face, someone capable of calculated deception on a scale I could barely comprehend. The reunion was 10 days away. Charles would return from his Dallas trip tomorrow, expecting to find his unsuspecting wife waiting to greet him, to listen to his fictional business stories, to continue playing her assigned role in his elaborate production. Instead, he would find me beginning the performance of a lifetime, maintaining the appearance of normalcy, while methodically preparing for the moment when both his worlds would collide spectacularly before those who mattered most to him. When Charles returned from his supposed business trip to Dallas, I greeted him with a practiced smile, and rehearsed questions about meetings that had never occurred. The performance felt surreal, me playing the role of devoted wife while watching him construct elaborate lies about clients, dinner presentations, and a hotel renovation that had supposedly disrupted his sleep. "The contractor situation sounds frustrating," I commented as I unpacked his suitcase, a task I'd always performed throughout our marriage. I noticed he'd packed more clothes than a 3-day trip required, and several items appeared unworn. Had they even made it out of the suitcase, or had they merely served as props in case I checked his luggage? "Completely unprofessional," Charles agreed, loosening his tie as he settled onto our bedroom chaise. "The project manager promised it would be resolved by my next visit, but I'm skeptical." I folded his unworn dress shirt, wondering if it had remained pristine because he'd spent 3 days in Kayla's apartment rather than a Dallas hotel. "When do you have to go back?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Not for at least 3 weeks," he replied, scrolling through emails on his phone. "Though with the Westlake development gaining momentum, my schedule is getting complicated." The ease with which he delivered these fabrications was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the situation. There was no hesitation, no telltale signs of deception. Just smooth, confident lies delivered with the same conviction he once used to tell me he loved me. How long had this skill been developing? Had there been earlier deceptions I'd never detected, or was this elaborate double life his first significant betrayal? That night, Charles initiated intimacy, reaching for me with familiar hands that now felt like those of a stranger. I allowed his embrace, fighting the revulsion that threatened to overtake me. His touch, once a source of comfort and connection, now felt like a violation. How many times had he touched Kayla with these same hands before returning home to me? How many nights had he whispered affections to her before calling me with excuses about late meetings? Whispered affections to her before calling me with excuses about late meetings? "I missed you," he said, his lips against my neck, his weight settling onto me with practiced ease. I missed you too," I lied, the words like ashes in my mouth as I closed my eyes and endured what had once been an expression of love, but now felt like the final desecration of our marriage. Afterward he fell asleep quickly, one arm draped possessively across my waist. I lay awake in the darkness, studying his profile in the dim light filtering through our curtains. In sleep he looked like the Charles Tharf had married. Features relaxed, vulnerability evident in a way it never was during his waking performance. This man who shared my bed was simultaneously my husband of 8 years and a complete stranger. A paradox I was still struggling to reconcile. The next morning, I implemented the first phase of my plan. While Charles showered, I used the password I'd discovered in his notebook to access his personal email. What I found exceeded even my worst suspicions. An entire digital life existed parallel to ours, correspondence with a real estate agent, about houses in the suburbs, discussions about preschools and childcare options, congratulatory messages about impending fatherhood, and references to a small ceremony after everything is settled. He and Kayla had created a shared digital calendar chronicling doctor's appointments, birthing classes, and, most stunning of all, a consultation with a family law attorney scheduled for the week after our family reunion. I scrolled through message after message, each more damning than the last. In his communications with Kayla, Charles presented himself as a man trapped in a loveless marriage, going through the motions while preparing for his real life to begin. Just a few more weeks, he'd written in one email dated 3 days ago. After the reunion, we can start telling everyone else. I promise. Charles was planning his exit, meticulously organizing a seamless transition from our marriage to his new family. The timing was calculated for maximum efficiency. He would enjoy one last Morgan family reunion, maintaining appearances before dismantling our life together on his timeline. What he couldn't know was that I was constructing my own timeline. With newfound access to his accounts, I documented everything, downloading emails, statements, and photographs to my secure cloud folder. I carefully cataloged how our joint funds had financed his parallel life, a $10,000 investment opportunity withdrawal that coincided with the first month's rent and security deposit on Kayla's apartment, frequent transfers to a previously unknown checking account, significant expenditures on furniture items never delivered to our home. I discovered photographs Charles had never shared with me, images of him and Kayla on weekend trips, at restaurants, in intimate moments that mirrored the memories he had once created with me. There were sonogram images of their developing child saved with file names like Baby Morgan 12 weeks JGPG. He had already claimed this child with his name while still married to me. Most revealing was a draft email to his parents, never sent, but saved multiple times with revisions. In it, Charles attempted to explain his life transition in terms that cast him in the most favorable light possible. A man who had grown apart from his wife, discovered true love unexpectedly, and was now embracing his responsibilities as a father-to-be. The email contained not a single acknowledgement of betrayal or apology for the deception he had perpetrated. Instead, it presented his actions as inevitable, even noble. The narrative of a man following his heart, rather than a husband systematically betraying his marriage vows. I forwarded everything to my secure account, then carefully deleted all traces of my digital reconnaissance from Charles's computer when he left for work. Kissing me goodbye with the same lips that had surely kissed Kayla hours before I'd picked him up at the airport, I felt nothing but cold determination. Armed with this evidence, I met with Patrick Reynolds again. This time, with a specific strategy in mind. I want to file immediately, I told him, sliding a USB drive across his desk containing all the evidence I'd gathered. But I don't want Charles served until the family reunion. Patrick raised an eyebrow. You want to publicly serve your husband divorce papers at a family gathering? Not exactly, I clarified, my voice steady despite the emotions simmering beneath the surface. I want everything prepared beforehand. I want to control the timing and circumstances under which he and his family learn about the divorce. Patrick studied me with professional detachment. Most clients prefer to avoid public confrontations. They're unpredictable, often messy. Charles has been maintaining 2 separate lives, I said calmly. He has a pregnant girlfriend who believes they'll be together officially after our family reunion. He's been using our joint funds to establish a household with her. He's scheduled a meeting with a divorce attorney the week after the reunion, without my knowledge. I met Patrick's gaze directly. He deserves 2 very public endings. We spent the next hour discussing specifics, what could be filed beforehand, how to manage asset protection, and how to ensure the legal groundwork would be completed before the reunion. Patrick was thorough, explaining both standard procedures and potential complications. The timing is tight but feasible, he confirmed, consulting his calendar. We can file the petition next Monday, which gives the court enough time to process the paperwork before the reunion weekend. I'll prepare everything for your signature tomorrow. There's one more thing, I added as our meeting concluded. I need a court order for a paternity test. Patrick's eyebrows lifted slightly. You have reason to believe he's fathered a child? I showed him the social media posts about Kayla's pregnancy and the sonogram images from Charles's email. I need official documentation, not just social media announcements and private emails. I want this included in the record. He nodded, making notes. A paternity action can be filed separately from the divorce proceedings. We'll need to name the mother and unborn child. Kayla Winters, I supplied. That won't be a problem. As I left Patrick's office, a weight seemed to shift, not lifting entirely, but redistributing into something more manageable. The betrayal remained devastating, but having a concrete plan provided a pathway through the emotional wreckage. For the first time since discovering the necklace, I felt a flicker of something beyond pain and confusion. A sense of reclaiming agency in a situation where I had been rendered a passive participant in my own life. The following days unfolded, participant in my own life. The following days unfolded in a carefully choreographed dance of deception. Not unlike what Charles had been performing for months, I realized with bitter irony. During daylight hours I maintained the facade of normalcy, attending to household routines, responding to his texts with appropriate affection, and discussing summer plans we both knew would never materialize. At night, while he slept, I meticulously prepared for the dismantling of our marriage. I opened a separate bank account at a different institution, transferring a modest portion of my personal savings, enough to sustain me through the transition period, but not so much that Charles could claim financial impropriety. I gathered important documents, birth certificate, passport, insurance policies, securing them in a safe deposit box only I could access. I photographed valuable items throughout our home, creating an inventory of assets that would need to be divided. Each night when Charles returned home, I watched him with new awareness, noting how he checked his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, how he locked himself in, his office for work calls that left him in better spirits, how he casually mentioned a new project team member named Kyle who seemed suspiciously like a gender-swapped version of Kayla. Kyle's got some innovative ideas about the Westlake development, he mentioned over dinner one evening. Really forward-thinking approach to community integration. Sounds impressive, I replied, wondering if he even registered the irony of appropriating Kayla's professional insights into his dinner conversation with me. You should introduce us sometime. Charles faltered momentarily, a brief hesitation before his smooth recovery. Absolutely, maybe at the next firm event. 7 days before the reunion, I began removing select personal items from our home. Family, heirlooms, irreplaceable photographs, the jewelry my grandmother had left me. Pieces of my history that existed before Charles and would continue after him. I stored these treasures at Tiffany's apartment, explaining their absence when noticed, as items loaned for a friend's photography project. Valerie's doing a series on heirloom objects, I explained when Charles commented on the missing silver picture frames that had held our wedding photos. She wanted to photograph them with proper lighting setup. He accepted this explanation without question, perhaps because he was too preoccupied with his own deceptions to notice mine, or perhaps because trust had always flowed more freely from him to me than in the reverse. Either way, his obliviousness worked to my advantage, as I systematically extracted the most meaningful pieces of my pre-Charles life from our shared space. Most challenging was maintaining physical proximity to Charles. Each kiss goodbye, each casual touch across the dinner table, each night spent beside him required suppressing my knowledge of his betrayal. I found myself studying him with a clinical detachment. This man I had loved for nearly a decade, now revealed as a stranger. Had there been signs from the beginning? Had I ignored red flags, making excuses for behavior that should have alarmed me? Or had he simply changed, the ambitious architect I married gradually transforming into someone capable of calculated deception? I remembered our wedding day, Charles's, voice breaking slightly as he promised to love and honor me all the days of his life. Had he meant those words then? Or had he always been this person capable of extraordinary compartmentalization and deception? 3 days before the reunion, Charles mentioned casually over breakfast that he'd invited a colleague to join us at the lake house. I hope that's okay, he said, not meeting my eyes as he spread jam on his toast. She's new to the area, and I thought it would be nice to include her. The Morgan reunions are legendary after all. The audacity was breathtaking. After months of deception, he was actually planning to bring his pregnant girlfriend to his family reunion, perhaps to begin the careful introduction of his new situation to his unsuspecting relatives. Was this how he planned to transition between his two lives, using his family's gathering as the bridge between old and new? Of course, I replied, my voice betraying nothing of the cold fury burning beneath my composed exterior. What's her name? In case I need to arrange accommodations. Kayla, he answered, visibly relieved by my easy acceptance. Kayla Winters. She's an architect focusing on sustainable design. I think you'll like her. I nodded, taking a sip of coffee to hide my expression. I'm sure I will. Is there anything else I should know about her? Any dietary restrictions or preferences? Charles hesitated fractionally, a barely perceptible pause that I would have missed had I not been scrutinizing his every reaction. No, nothing special. Nothing special except that she's carrying your child, I thought. Nothing special, except that you've been building a life with her while sleeping in our bed. Great, I said brightly. I'll make sure we have everything ready. That evening I finalized arrangements with Patrick. The divorce papers were prepared, waiting only for my signature. The paternity test order had been granted by a judge sympathetic to my situation. All legal groundwork was in place. "Are you absolutely certain about this approach?" Patrick asked during our final meeting. "Once set in motion, there's no turning back." I thought of the lake house that had been in Charles's family for generations, the setting of countless Morgan celebrations. I thought of his mother, Audrey, who had welcomed me so warmly, and his father, Claude, whose approval had meant everything to Charles. I thought of the cousins, aunts, and uncles who had embraced me as family for 8 years. I also thought of the emails I had discovered. Charles planned to use the reunion as his last family obligation before transitioning to his new life. His calculated intention to introduce Kayla casually to prepare the ground for later revelations, his complete disregard for the humiliation this would eventually cause me when the truth emerged in his preferred timeline. "I'm certain," I confirmed, signing the documents with a steady hand. "If Charles wants to build his new life on the ruins of our marriage, he should be prepared to stand in those ruins publicly." Patrick nodded, accepting my decision without judgment. "I'll be there as we discussed, Saturday at 4 p.m. just before the traditional pre-dinner gathering." "Thank you," I said, realizing I meant it sincerely. Patrick's professional competence had provided structure during the most chaotic period of my life, a framework that allowed me to transform shock and grief into purposeful action. The day before the reunion, I packed our car with careful precision: linens, food for the weekend, decorations for the lakeside gathering. Beneath these ordinary items lay a slim briefcase containing the documents that would end my marriage and expose Charles's double life for all his family to witness. As I worked, Charles moved around the house with unusual nervousness, checking his phone frequently and making calls from the privacy of our backyard. Was he coordinating with Kayla, finalizing their plans for what would surely be an awkward introduction? The thought of her anticipation, believing she was being brought to meet her future in-laws under Charles's carefully managed circumstances, almost made me pity her. Almost. That night, our last in the home we had shared for 8 years, Charles was attentive in a way he hadn't been in months. He brought home flowers, suggested we open a special bottle of wine, reminisced about previous family reunions with apparent nostalgia. "Remember 2 years ago when Arnold fell off the dock?" He laughed, refilling my wine glass. Dad was furious about the damaged boat, but Mom couldn't stop laughing. I smiled, playing along with this performance of marital harmony. Was this a genuine moment of connection, or was he simply assuaging his guilt before the transition he had planned? Perhaps both were true. Human emotions rarely sort themselves into tidy categories of authentic or artificial. "Your mother sent me the photo she took right after," I recalled. Arnold standing on the dock completely soaked, still holding his beer perfectly level. Charles's laugh seemed genuine, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way that had once made my heart skip. "That's going in the family history books for sure." For a brief disorienting moment, I glimpsed what might have been. The life we could have shared if different choices had been made, if respect and honesty had guided his actions instead of selfishness and deception. The phantom pain of this lost future pierced through my carefully maintained composure. Later, as Charles slept beside me for what would be the final time, I stared at the ceiling thinking of all that lay ahead. Tomorrow, we would drive to the lake house as husband and wife. By Sunday, we would be adversaries in a divorce proceeding, our private life exposed to public scrutiny, our shared history recontextualized by the revelation of his betrayal. As we drove toward the lake house the next morning, Charles unusually quiet beside me, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For months, I had been an unwitting character in his fiction. Tomorrow, I would reclaim my narrative and ensure that everyone knew exactly who Charles Morgan truly was. The Morgan family lake house stood as it always had, a sprawling timber and stone structure nestled among pine trees on the eastern shore of Lake Oswego, its wide deck extending toward the water's edge. Built by Charles's grandfather in the 1960s, the property had been passed down through generations, becoming the symbolic heart of the Morgan family identity. Charles often said that his earliest and happiest memories were formed within these walls and along this shoreline. As we pulled into the gravel driveway, the familiar crunch of stones beneath our tires triggered a cascade of memories from the 8 previous reunions I had attended as Charles's partner. First as his girlfriend, then fiancée, and finally as his wife. I remembered my initial nervousness meeting the extended family, Claude's warm welcome speech my first year, helping Audrey prepare traditional dishes in the spacious kitchen, late-night conversations around the fire pit that had gradually transformed me from outsider to family member. Now I returned as someone playing the role of wife while preparing to publicly shed that identity forever. The cognitive dissonance was dizzying. "Looks like we're not the first to arrive," Charles observed, his voice carrying an undercurrent of tension I might have missed 3 months ago. He nodded toward the vehicles already parked in a neat row. Claude and Audrey's silver SUV, his brother Arnold's red pickup truck, his cousin Tiffany's compact sedan. "Family tradition," I replied lightly, reaching for my overnight bag in the back seat. "Your mother always insists on arriving early to prepare the house." For 8 years I had partnered with Audrey Morgan to coordinate these gatherings, arranging sleeping accommodations, planning meals, organizing activities for the various generations of Morgans who would converge for their annual celebration. This year, I had volunteered for all the usual responsibilities, a decision that had clearly relieved Charles. He had assumed my eagerness to host stemmed from a desire to maintain normalcy. In reality, it had provided the perfect cover for orchestrating what would come next. As we approached the house, I took in the familiar details: the hanging baskets of fuchsias Audrey planted each spring, the hand-carved welcome sign Claude had created for their 40th anniversary, the collection of well-worn Adirondack chairs arranged for lake viewing on the broad front lawn. The property exuded a sense of permanence and tradition that made the impending disruption feel almost sacrilegious. Almost. Audrey greeted us at the door, embracing me with genuine warmth before turning to her son. I watched their interaction with new eyes, wondering if she had any inkling of the double life her eldest child had been leading. "You look tired, Charles," she observed, maternal concern evident as she studied his face. "Working too hard again? Just a busy quarter," he replied, kissing her cheek. "Nothing a weekend at the lake won't fix." I wondered if Audrey noticed the slight aversion of his eyes as he spoke, a tell I had only recently learned to recognize when Charles was constructing rather than recounting. Or perhaps mothers developed a sixth sense about their children's deceptions, an intuition currently setting off subconscious alarms she couldn't quite identify. "Everything looks wonderful, Abigail," she complimented as we carried supplies into the kitchen. "I don't know how you manage to organize all this with your work schedule. You're always so thoughtful about these gatherings." "It's important to me," I replied honestly. These people had become my family too, a connection I had valued deeply and would mourn losing regardless of how things unfolded with Charles. The afternoon progressed according to long-standing tradition. Extended family members arrived in waves, each bringing favorite dishes and stories from the past year. Children raced across the lawn toward the lake, their excited voices carrying on the summer breeze. The men gathered near Claude's prized barbecue grill, cold beers in hand as they debated cooking techniques with ritualistic familiarity. I moved through these scenes with practiced ease, refilling drinks, engaging in conversations, snapping photos that would soon become artifacts of a family configuration about to implode. Several relatives commented on my apparent serenity, attributing it to the peaceful lake setting rather than the calm that comes from absolute certainty of purpose. In contrast, Charles seemed increasingly distracted as the afternoon progressed, his attention repeatedly drawn to the driveway where Kayla would eventually appear. He checked his phone compulsively, stepping away from conversations mid-sentence when notifications arrived. "Is Charles expecting a work call?" his Aunt Margaret inquired after he checked his phone for the 5th time in as many minutes. "He seems rather preoccupied today." "Something like that," I replied with a smile that revealed nothing of the cold calculation behind it. "A new project he's very invested in." The literal truth of this statement provided a private moment of dark amusement. Charles was indeed invested in a new project, a replacement family carefully constructed alongside our marriage, now approaching its public debut. I glanced at my watch. 3:35 p.m. Patrick Reynolds would arrive at precisely 4, impeccably timed to coincide with the family's traditional pre-dinner gathering on the deck. I had provided detailed instructions, ensuring he would know exactly when and how to make his entrance for maximum impact. I caught sight of Claude near the boathouse, deep in conversation with Arnold about the new dock they planned to build next year. Charles's father remained an imposing figure at 72, tall and silver, haired with the erect posture of someone who had commanded respect throughout his life. As the founder of the architectural firm Charles now helped lead, Claude had established both the professional legacy and moral standard against which his son had always measured himself. What would Claude's reaction be when he learned of his son's deception? The thought sent a small tremor of doubt through my resolve. Was I wrong to orchestrate this public revelation? Should I have opted for a private confrontation instead? Then I remembered the email draft I had discovered on Charles's computer, his calculated plan to use this very gathering as a soft introduction before revealing the full truth later on his terms. His intention to control the narrative, to paint himself as a man following his heart, rather than a husband betraying his vows. His complete disregard for how this would eventually humiliate me among the people who had become my family. No. Charles had forfeited the right to a dignified private ending when he decided to bring his pregnant girlfriend to our family reunion. March. Charles's phone chimed with a message. His expression brightened immediately, tension visibly leaving his shoulders as he read the screen. He excused himself from a conversation with his father to head toward the front of the house. Kayla had arrived. I intercepted Audrey near the kitchen. "Could you ask everyone to gather on the deck?" I requested. "I have a special announcement to make before dinner." She nodded, pleased by the prospect of a surprise. "Of course, dear. Is everything all right? You seem a bit tense today." I smiled, a genuine moment of affection for this woman who had treated me as a daughter. "Everything is about to become much clearer," I assured her. By the time I reached the deck, most of the family had assembled. Claude was sharing an animated story about his recent fishing trip, gesturing with his beer bottle as laughter rippled through the group. Children perched on the railing under watchful parental eyes, while the older generation claimed the comfortable chairs arranged in a semicircle facing the lake. I positioned myself carefully, selecting a vantage point that would afford me an unobstructed view of both the driveway and the path leading from it to the deck. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn, creating dramatic lighting for what was about to unfold. A perfect stage for the final act of my marriage. The sound of tires on gravel announced a new arrival. Conversations quieted momentarily as family members glanced toward the front of the house, curious about the latecomer. I checked my watch. 3:52 p.m. Patrick would arrive in precisely 8 minutes. "Who else are we expecting?" Arnold's wife inquired, nursing a glass of white wine as she adjusted her sunglasses. Before anyone could respond, Charles appeared at the edge of the deck, his hand guiding a young woman up the steps. Even knowing what to expect, the sight sent a jolt through me. Kayla Winters was more striking in person than in photographs, her auburn hair catching the afternoon light, her green eyes bright with nervous anticipation. The sundress she wore, pale yellow with a floral pattern, did little to conceal the gentle curve of her pregnancy. She moved with the cautious awareness of someone entering unfamiliar territory, staying close to Charles as if drawing confidence from his presence. Her gaze darted around the gathering, taking in the curious faces of the Morgan family before settling briefly on me. There was no recognition in her eyes. Charles had clearly never shown her photos of his wife, another level of compartmentalization in his carefully managed double life. A confused silence fell over the gathering as Charles guided her forward. His expression, a mixture of determination and barely concealed anxiety. Several family members exchanged puzzled glances, while Audrey's smile froze in polite confusion. "Everyone," Charles began, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet deck. "I'd like you to meet Kayla." He offered no additional context, no explanation of who this woman was, or why she had been invited to what had always been a family-only gathering. The omission was telling. Charles was testing the waters, introducing Kayla as a seemingly casual addition while planning to reveal her true significance later, after he had gauged the family's initial reaction. In the suspended moment that followed, I observed the various reactions rippling through the assembled family. Claude's furrowed brow, Audrey's uncertain smile, Arnold's narrowed eyes as he assessed the situation with growing suspicion. None of them yet understood what they were witnessing, but all sensed the disruption to their familiar patterns. "Kayla works with Charles at the firm," I supplied helpfully, stepping forward. My voice carried clearly across the deck, drawing all eyes toward me. "She's new to the area. Isn't that right, Charles?" Surprise flickered across his face at my apparent support, quickly replaced by cautious relief. This was not the scenario he had anticipated. His wife facilitating rather than questioning the introduction of an unknown woman to the family gathering. "Yes. Kayla transferred from Seattle last year," he confirmed, recovering quickly. "She's been instrumental in the Westlake development. I thought it would be nice for her to experience a Morgan family tradition." Audrey, ever the gracious hostess, recovered first. "How lovely to meet you, Kayla. Welcome to our home." She stepped forward with the warmth she extended to all guests. Though her eyes held questions, she was too polite to voice in this setting. "Thank you for having me," Kayla replied, her voice carrying a slight tremor that betrayed her nervousness. "Charles has told me so much about these reunions. It's an honor to be included." As introductions circulated around the deck, I noted the precise moment when Audrey's gaze dropped to Kayla's midsection, her expression shifting subtly as she processed what she was seeing. A pregnant young woman brought to a family gathering by her married son, introduced with peculiar formality and obvious nervousness. I watched comprehension dawn in Audrey's eyes, followed quickly by confusion, and then the first flickers of alarm. She glanced toward me, perhaps expecting signs of distress or anger, and seemed even more concerned when she found only composed observation. I checked my watch again. 3:58 p.m. "Charles has told me so much about all of you," Kayla was saying, her hand unconsciously resting on her stomach in that universal gesture of expectant mothers. "It's wonderful to finally meet everyone." Finally. The word hung in the air, laden with unintended meaning. How long had she been hearing stories about these people? How many details of Morgan family history had Charles shared with her while building their secret life together? Claude approached, extending his hand to Kayla with a formal courtesy. That was his trademark. "Welcome to our gathering. Any colleague of Charles is welcome here." His emphasis on colleague suggested he was already sensing something beyond a professional relationship, though not yet grasping the full reality. Sound of another vehicle approaching silenced the uncomfortable small talk. "Right on time. Are we expecting someone else?" Claude asked, looking at Charles with confusion. "I invited a colleague," I explained, my voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "He should be joining us momentarily." Charles frowned, clearly thrown by this unexpected development. "You didn't mention anyone else was coming, didn't I?" I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "How strange. I thought I was being quite transparent about my plans." The barb landed precisely as intended. Charles flinched slightly, recognition flashing in his eyes. For the first time, uncertainty clouded his features as he registered that something was happening outside his carefully constructed narrative. Before he could respond, Patrick Reynolds appeared at the deck steps. In his tailored navy suit and carrying a leather portfolio, he looked exactly what he was, a legal professional arriving for business rather than pleasure. His timing was impeccable. His demeanor perfectly calibrated to the situation. Professional, without being intimidating. Serious without appearing grim. "Abigail." He greeted me with a professional nod. "I hope I'm not late." "Perfect timing, actually," I assured him, turning to face the confused gathering. "Everyone, this is Patrick Reynolds, my attorney." The atmosphere shifted instantly, a collective tension descending over the previously festive scene. Charles stared at Patrick, then at me, comprehension dawning in his eyes along with the first traces of panic. "Your attorney?" Arnold echoed, looking between us with growing concern. "Abby, what's going on?" "That's an excellent question," I replied, maintaining the calm that had become my armor throughout this ordeal. "Perhaps Charles would like to explain why he's brought his pregnant girlfriend to our family reunion, or would you prefer I handle the introductions?" A collective gasp rippled through the gathering. Audrey's hand flew to her mouth while Claude straightened in his chair, his expression darkening as he looked at his son. Kayla took a half-step backward, her eyes widening as she processed my words. "Pregnant?" Claude repeated, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Charles, what is Abigail talking about?" Charles took a step forward, hands raised in a placating gesture, desperation evident in his rapid blinking and the slight tremor in his hands. "Everyone, please. This is a complicated situation that Abigail and I need to discuss privately." "Complicated?" I echoed, allowing some of the emotion I had so carefully contained to finally surface. "Is that what you call maintaining two separate lives for nearly a year? Is that what you call using our joint funds to support your girlfriend while lying to my face every single day?" The controlled fury in my voice silenced any attempted interruptions, all eyes fixed on Charles waiting for his response. He stood frozen, mouth working soundlessly as he confronted the collision of his two carefully separated worlds. Kayla had backed away from him, confusion and betrayal evident in her expression as she looked between us. Patrick stepped forward, opening his leather portfolio with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Morgan, I'm here to formally serve you with divorce papers and a court order for paternity testing." He extended the documents toward Charles, who made no move to accept them. Patrick simply placed them on the nearby table, the legal papers stark against the cheerful gingham tablecloth Audrey had carefully arranged that morning. Paternity testing? Audrey's voice was barely audible, her gaze now fixed on Kayla's midsection with horrified understanding. The perfect family reunion Charles had anticipated, his last performance as devoted husband before transitioning to his new life, had transformed into a public unmasking he had never envisioned. The script he had so carefully crafted had been replaced with one he had no part in writing, leaving him stammering and exposed before the family whose opinion he valued above all others. Kayla took another step back, one hand protectively covering her stomach. "Charles," she whispered loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You said you were separated. You said your wife knew everything." "Another lie," I confirmed, meeting her eyes directly for the first time. "Charles and I were very much married with no discussions of separation. I discovered your existence entirely by accident when I found the necklace he bought you. The silver daisy with the diamond center, hidden in his suit pocket." Recognition flashed across Kayla's face. She reached up unconsciously to touch the pendant hanging at her throat, the very piece of jewelry that had begun my investigation. The irony was almost poetic. The gift meant to celebrate their connection had become the first thread that unraveled his deception. "You told me you were sleeping in separate bedrooms," she said to Charles, her voice gaining strength as shock gave way to anger. "You said the divorce was already being filed." Charles reached for her arm. "Kayla, please don't touch me," she snapped, recoiling from him. "Was any of it true? Anything at all?" The assembled family watched this exchange in stunned silence, collectively processing the revelation of Charles's double life. Arnold stood up abruptly, moving to his father's side as if the older man might need physical support in the face of this family crisis. Charles's cousin muttered something that sounded like always thought he was too perfect, while his Aunt Margaret made a small distressed sound. Claude Morgan finally rose from his chair, his movements deliberate, his face flushed with a combination of shock and anger. At 72 he still possessed the commanding presence that had made him a respected figure in both the family and the community. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority that had established the moral framework of the Morgan family for decades. "Is this true, Charles?" he demanded. "Have you been unfaithful to Abigail? Is this woman carrying your child?" The question hung in the air, unavoidable and direct. Charles seemed to shrink under his father's gaze, the confident professional facade crumbling completely. The man who had smoothly navigated board meetings and client presentations found himself speechless before the moral judgment of his father. "Dad, it's not what it looks like," he finally managed. The weak opening immediately cut short. "Answer the question," Claude interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. A tense silence hung over the deck. Even the distant sounds of children playing seemed to fade away as if nature itself held its breath waiting for Charles's response. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gathering, highlighting the stark tableau of family members frozen in various postures of shock and disbelief. "Yes," Charles finally admitted, the single word dropping like a stone into still water. "But you don't understand the circumstances." "What's to understand?" Claude's voice rose, unusual for a man known for his measured temperament. "You made vows before God and this family. You brought another woman, pregnant with your child, into our home, to our family gathering. What possible explanation could justify such behavior?" Audrey had risen to stand beside her husband, her initial shock hardening into something colder. "How far along is she, Charles?" 4 months, Kayla answered before Charles could speak, her voice trembling but determined. "I'm due in November." 4 months, Audrey repeated, performing the mental calculation that I had done days earlier. While you were celebrating your 8th anniversary with Abigail, the precision of this observation landed with visible impact. Charles physically flinched, the timeline making his betrayal even more stark. Our anniversary trip to Cannon Beach, the oceanfront suite, the champagne toast to many more years together, all while Kayla was already carrying his child. Charles ran a hand through his hair, his composure disintegrating further as he lost control of the narrative. "Mom, Dad, please. This isn't how I wanted you to find out." "How exactly did you plan for us to find out?" Arnold interjected, his disgust evident. "Were you going to introduce this baby as a colleague's child? Or were you planning to abandon Abigail after the reunion, and hope we'd simply accept your new family without question?" The accuracy of Arnold's second guess was written across Charles's face. That had indeed been the plan. One final Morgan family reunion before executing his carefully orchestrated exit from our marriage. "I think it's quite clear what Charles intended," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "The consultation with his divorce attorney is scheduled for next week. After securing a house in Oak Ridge Hills, using our joint investment funds for the down payment, I might add, and after enjoying one last family reunion under false pretenses. Patrick cleared his throat, his professional demeanor providing a steadying influence amid the emotional chaos. Mrs. Morgan has documented extensive financial improprieties, including the diversion of joint marital assets to support this parallel relationship. The court will take a very dim view of such behavior during divorce proceedings. Charles turned on me then, desperation giving way to anger. You planned this entire spectacle, he accused, gesturing around at his assembled family. You deliberately humiliated me in front of my family. No, Charles, I corrected him calmly. You humiliated yourself. I merely refuse to let you control the narrative any longer. You don't get to decide when and how your betrayal becomes public knowledge. You sacrificed that right when you brought your pregnant girlfriend to our family reunion. My words hung in the air, unanswerable because they were undeniably true. Charles stood immobilized, caught between the collapsing fiction he had maintained and the unforgiving reality now exposed for all to see. Kayla had backed away from Charles, her face, a study in devastation and betrayal. The beautiful, confident professional I had observed from across the street days earlier was gone, replaced by a young woman confronting the shattering of her own illusions. You told me she knew, she repeated, tears welling in her eyes. You said this was all agreed upon, that she understood it was over between you. She turned to me, unexpected empathy crossing her features. I would never have if I had known. I'm not that person. I believe you, I told her, surprising myself with the sincerity of those words. In that moment, I recognized that Kayla too had been manipulated by Charles's elaborate deceptions. Different lies, but stemming from the same calculated selfishness. Claude had heard enough. Charles, get your things, he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. You won't be staying here tonight. Dad, not another word. Claude cut him off. In my 72, I have never been so ashamed of anyone bearing the Morgan name. The finality in his father's tone seemed to penetrate where nothing else had. Charles stood speechless, the full consequences of his actions finally crashing down upon him. The carefully constructed life he had maintained, respected architect, devoted husband, beloved son, lay in ruins around him, dismantled by his own choices. Audrey stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on my arm. Abigail, you don't have to leave, this is still your family reunion. I squeezed her hand appreciatively. Thank you, Audrey, but I think I need some space right now. She nodded, in understanding, tears glistening in her eyes. We'll talk tomorrow, she promised. As I turned to leave, Kayla's voice stopped me. Abigail? I paused, meeting her gaze. The connection between us was strange. Two women who had unwittingly shared a life with the same man, both betrayed in different ways. I'm sorry, she said simply. I truly didn't know about any of it. I nodded once, acknowledging her words without offering absolution. Her relationship with Charles was her own reckoning, separate from mine. Whether she would continue with him, knowing the foundation of lies upon which their relationship was built, was not my concern. My path forward was clear, documented in the papers Patrick had brought. Patrick accompanied me inside the house where I collected my overnight bag, packed that morning with the foresight of a woman who knew her world was about to irrevocably change. Are you all right? He asked as we walked toward his car. Behind us the murmur of shocked conversations continued on the deck, the aftershocks of my revelations still rippling through the Morgan family gathering. Children had been quietly gathered by concerned parents, whisked away from the adult drama unfolding on the deck. Claude's authoritative voice carried occasionally, still addressing his disgraced son in tones of profound disappointment. No, I answered honestly, glancing back at the lake house that had been my second home for 8 years, but I will be. As we drove away, I watched the Morgan family lake house recede in the side mirror. The sight of so many happy memories now transformed into the setting for the final act of my marriage. The trees surrounding the property bent slightly in the late afternoon breeze, their shadows stretching across the lawn where I had once envisioned children, our children playing during future reunions. That future was gone, swept away by Charles's choices, but as the property disappeared from view around a bend in the road, I felt something unexpected beneath the grief and anger, the first faint stirring of relief. The performance was over. The truth, however painful, had finally been spoken aloud, and in that truth lay the first step toward whatever came next. Charles stood frozen, his gaze darting between me and Patrick, then to Kayla, whose confusion was rapidly transforming into alarm. The assembled Morgan family had gone completely silent, the only sounds the distant lapping of lake water against the shore, and the faint laughter of children playing at the water's edge, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding on the deck. "Abigail," Charles finally managed, attempting a casual tone that failed to mask his panic. "This isn't the time or place for whatever this is." "Actually," I replied, maintaining my composure, "I disagree. I think this is exactly the right time and place. You chose to bring your pregnant girlfriend to your family reunion. I merely invited my attorney. Which of these seems more inappropriate, to you?" A collective gasp rippled through the gathering. Audrey's hand flew to her mouth while Claude straightened in his chair, his expression darkening as he looked at his son. "Pregnant?" he repeated, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Charles, what is Abigail talking about?" Charles took a step forward, hands raised in a placating gesture. "Everyone, please. This is a complicated situation that Abigail and I need to discuss privately." "Complicated," I echoed, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. "Is that what you call maintaining two separate lives for nearly a year? Is that what you call using our joint funds to support your girlfriend while lying to my face every single day?" Patrick stepped forward, opening his leather portfolio. The consummate professional, he showed no discomfort at being thrust into this family drama. "Mr. Morgan, I'm here to formally serve you with divorce papers and a court order for paternity testing." He extended the documents toward Charles, who made no move to accept them. Patrick simply placed them on the nearby table, the legal papers, stark against the cheerful gingham tablecloth Audrey had carefully arranged that morning. "Paternity testing?" Audrey's voice was barely audible, her gaze now fixed on Kayla's midsection with horrified understanding. Kayla took a half step backward, one hand protectively covering her stomach. "Charles," she whispered, "you said you were separated. You said your wife knew everything." "Another lie," I confirmed, meeting her eyes directly for the first time. "Charles and I were very much married with no discussions of separation, until I found the necklace he bought you, the silver daisy with the diamond center, hidden in his suit pocket." Recognition flashed across Kayla's face. She reached up unconsciously to touch the pendant hanging at her throat, the very piece of jewelry that had begun my investigation. "You told me you were sleeping in separate bedrooms," she said to Charles, her voice gaining strength. "You said the divorce was already being filed." Charles reached for her arm. "Kayla, please don't touch me," she snapped, recoiling from him. "Was any of it true? Anything at all?" The assembled family watched this exchange in stunned silence, collectively processing the revelation of Charles's double life. Arnold stood up abruptly, moving to his father's side as if the older man might need physical support. Charles's cousin muttered something that sounded like always thought he was too perfect, while his Aunt Margaret made a small distressed sound. Claude Morgan finally rose from his chair, his movements deliberate, his face flushed with a combination of shock and anger. At 72 he still possessed the commanding presence that had made him a respected figure in both the family and the community. "Is this true, Charles?" he demanded. "Have you been unfaithful to Abigail? Is this woman carrying your child?" Charles seemed to shrink under his father's gaze, the confident professional facade crumbling completely. "Dad, it's not what it looks like." "Answer the question," Claude interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. A tense silence hung over the deck. Even the distant sounds of children playing seemed to fade away, as if nature itself held its breath, waiting for Charles' response. "Yes," he finally admitted, the single word dropping like a stone into still water. "But you don't understand the circumstances." "What's to understand?" Claude's voice rose. "You made vows before God and this family. You brought another woman, pregnant with your child, into our home, to our family gathering. What possible explanation could justify such behavior?" Audrey had risen to stand beside her husband, her initial shock hardening into something colder. "How far along is she, Charles?" 4 months, Kayla answered before Charles could speak, her voice trembling. "I'm due in November." 4 months, Audrey repeated, performing the mental calculation. "While you were celebrating your 8th anniversary with Abigail." Charles ran a hand through his hair, his composure disintegrating further as he lost control of the narrative. Dad, please. This isn't how I wanted you to find out." "How exactly did you plan for us to find out?" Arnold interjected, his disgust evident. "Were you going to introduce this baby as a colleague's child? Or were you planning to abandon Abigail after the reunion, and hope we'd simply accept your new family without question?" The accuracy of Arnold's second guess was written across Charles's face. That had indeed been the plan. One final Morgan family reunion before executing his carefully orchestrated exit from our marriage. "I think it's quite clear what Charles intended," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "The consultation with his divorce attorney is scheduled for next week. After securing a house in Oak Ridge Hills, using our joint investment funds for the down payment, I might add. And after enjoying one last family reunion under false pretenses," Patrick cleared his throat. "Mrs. Morgan has documented extensive financial improprieties, including the diversion of joint marital assets to support this parallel relationship. The court will take a very dim view of such behavior during divorce proceedings." Charles turned on me then, desperation giving way to anger. "You planned this entire spectacle," he accused. "You deliberately humiliated me in front of my family." "No, Charles," I corrected him calmly. "You humiliated yourself. I merely refused to let you control the narrative any longer." Kayla had backed away from Charles, her face a study in devastation and betrayal. "You told me she knew," she repeated, tears welling in her eyes. "You said this was all agreed upon, that she understood it was over between you." She turned to me, unexpected empathy crossing her features. "I would never have if I had known." "I believe you," I told her, surprising myself with the sincerity of those words. In that moment I recognized that Kayla too had been manipulated by Charles's elaborate deceptions, different lies but stemming from the same calculated selfishness. Claude had heard enough. "Charles, get your things," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You won't be staying here tonight." "Dad." "Not another word." Claude cut him off. "In my 72 I've never been so ashamed of anyone bearing the Morgan name." The finality in his father's tone seemed to penetrate where nothing else had. Charles stood speechless, the full consequences of his actions finally crashing down upon him. The carefully constructed life he had maintained, respected architect, devoted husband, beloved son, lay in ruins around him, dismantled by his own choices. Audrey stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on my arm. "Abigail, you don't have to leave. This is still your home reunion." I squeezed her hand appreciatively. "Thank you, Audrey, but I think I need some space right now." She nodded in understanding, tears glistening in her eyes. "We'll talk tomorrow," she promised. As I turned to leave, Kayla's voice stopped me. "Abigail?" I paused, meeting her gaze. The connection between us was strange. Two women who had unwittingly shared a life with the same man, both betrayed in different ways. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "I truly didn't know." I nodded once, acknowledging her words without offering absolution. Her relationship with Charles was her own reckoning, separate from mine. Patrick accompanied me inside the house where I collected my overnight bag, packed that morning with the foresight of a woman who knew her world was about to irrevocably change. "Are you all right?" he asked as we walked toward his car. Behind us the murmur of shocked conversations continued on the deck, the aftershocks of my revelations still rippling through the Morgan family gathering. "No," I answered honestly, "but I will be." Patrick drove me to a small boutique hotel 30 minutes from the lake house. We had reserved the room in advance. Another detail in my meticulously planned extraction from Charles's life. The hotel lobby, with its rustic charm and flickering fireplace, felt really normal after the emotional intensity of the past few hours. "I've scheduled a follow-up meeting for Tuesday," Patrick said as we stood in the quiet reception area. "By then, Charles will have had time to consult with counsel, and we can begin formal negotiations." I nodded, feeling a strange detachment as if watching myself from a distance. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving an emotional vacuum in its wake. "What happens now?" I asked, realizing I had planned extensively for the exposure, but given little thought to what would follow. Patrick's expression softened slightly. Professional detachment giving way to genuine concern. "Now you rest. The legal process will take time, but the groundwork is solid. Charles has little room to maneuver given the documented financial improprieties and public admission of infidelity." After he left, I stood alone in the hotel room surrounded by bland, inoffensive decor chosen specifically to make any traveler feel comfortable without creating a lasting impression. How fitting for this transitional moment, suspended between the life I had lost and whatever lay ahead. Took a long shower, as if I could wash away the past 8 years along with the stress of the day. Afterward, wrapped in the hotel's plush robe, I finally allowed myself to feel the emotions I had so carefully contained during the confrontation. The tears, when they came, weren't the desperate sobs I might have expected, but rather a quiet, steady release. Grief not just for the marriage I had lost, but for the future I had planned. The children Charles and I would never have. The shared dreams that had evaporated like morning mist. My phone chimed repeatedly throughout the evening. Messages from Tiffany offering support, texts from Charles that I left unread, and most surprisingly, a gentle note from Audrey. "We love you, Abigail. That hasn't changed." Around midnight, when sleep remained elusive, I opened my laptop and created a new document titled After Charles. At the top I typed a simple question. Who am I now? For 8 years I had been Abigail Morgan, wife of Charles, daughter-in-law to Claude and Audrey, environmental consultant with a part-time practice that accommodated my husband's more demanding career. My identity had been crafted in relation to Charles, my life decisions made within the context of our partnership. Now that framework had disintegrated, leaving me to rediscover myself amid the rubble. I began typing, not answers, but possibilities. Full-time consulting work or perhaps a position with an environmental advocacy organization. I had previously declined because it required extensive travel. The international volunteer program I had bookmarked years ago but never seriously considered because Charles was establishing his partnership. Graduate studies in environmental policy, a passion I had set aside to focus on building our life together. The list grew as the night progressed, each entry a small act of reclamation. By dawn I had filled pages with potential futures, some practical, others wildly aspirational, all exclusively mine. I slept for a few hours, waking to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the disorienting moment of forgetting, then remembering everything that had transpired. The hotel phone rang as I was contemplating breakfast. "Abigail, it's Audrey Morgan." Her voice triggered a fresh wave of emotion. Throughout my marriage, Audrey had been more than a mother-in-law. She had been a mentor, confidant, and friend. "Audrey," I replied, uncertain what protocol governed relationships with in-laws after publicly exposing their son as an adulterer. "I'm in the hotel lobby," she said simply. "Would you have breakfast with me?" 20 minutes later we sat across from each other at a quiet corner table in the hotel restaurant. Two women connected by circumstances neither had anticipated. Audrey looked older than she had just 24 hours earlier. New lines etched around her eyes and mouth. Her usual impeccable appearance slightly diminished. She had ordered coffee for both of us, but left hers untouched. "Charles has gone to stay with his college friend Thomas," she said after a moment of silence. "Kayla left immediately after you did." She sighed, searching for words, "unlike anything our family has ever experienced." "I'm sorry it happened that way," I said, surprised to discover I meant it. My quarrel had been with Charles, not his family. "I never wanted to hurt you or Claude. Don't apologize." Audrey shook her head firmly. "Charles created this situation, not you. Claude and I raised him to be better than this." Her eyes met mine, directly maternal warmth tempered with dignified strength. "I want you to know that whatever happens between you and Charles, you will always be family to us if you wish to be." "The papers Patrick brought, you're proceeding with divorce?" "Yes," I confirmed. "There's no coming back from this, Audrey." She nodded, acceptance rather than resistance in her expression. "I understand." "And the paternity test?" "The court ordered it. Charles will need to comply." I hesitated before adding, "Kayla is 4 months pregnant." "The timing coincided with your anniversary trip," Audrey finished, a flash of anger crossing her features. Claude pointed that out as well. To think that Charles was, she trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, each processing our own version of grief for the family that would never be. Finally, Audrey reached across the table to clasp my hand. "What will you do now, Abigail?" The question echoed my midnight contemplations. "I'm not entirely sure yet. Return to work full-time, certainly. Perhaps explore some opportunities I've put aside. I've been looking at an environmental research position that would involve fieldwork in Costa Rica." Speaking the possibility aloud gave it substance, transforming it from midnight musings to potential reality. "You would be wonderful at that," Audrey said with genuine enthusiasm. "You've always been passionate about conservation work." It struck me then that she remembered this detail about me, my passion for tropical forest conservation, even though it had been years since I'd actively pursued it. She had seen me, truly seen me, even as her son had reduced me to a convenient role in his carefully compartmentalized life. "About the house," I began, turning to practical matters. "Charles and I will need to sell it." "The mortgage," Audrey waved away my concern. One step at a time, dear. Today is for healing, not logistics. After breakfast she walked me to my car. I had arranged for Tiffany to bring it from the lake house early that morning. This isn't goodbye, Audrey said firmly as we embraced. Unless you want it to be? I don't, I admitted, realizing I treasured this connection independent of my relationship with Charles. As I drove away, I glimpsed Audrey in my rearview mirror, a solitary figure standing in the hotel driveway. She too was navigating a new reality, one where her son was not the man she had believed him to be, where grandparenthood would arrive under circumstances no one had envisioned. Yet even in this moment of recalibration, she had reached out not from obligation, but from genuine care. It was a poignant reminder that authentic connections could survive even the dissolution of the circumstances that created them. The highway stretched before me, carrying me back toward the home that would soon no longer be mine. There would be difficult days ahead, legal proceedings, division of assets, the practical dismantling of a shared life. Charles would likely alternate between remorse and resentment, between attempts at reconciliation and blame-shifting justifications. But as I merged onto the interstate, I felt something unexpected beneath the lingering sadness, a subtle current of anticipation. The future I had planned with Charles was gone, irretrievably shattered by his deception. In its place lay something both terrifying and exhilarating, a life entirely of my own making. I reached for my phone and dialed the number I had saved last night. Dr. Ramirez, this is Abigail Morgan. I'm calling about the research position in Costa Rica. Yes. I'd like to schedule that interview after all. 1 year after the family reunion that ended my marriage, the Costa Rican morning unfolds in layers of sound, distant howler monkeys, the persistent chorus of tropical birds, and the gentle rustle of leaves stirring in the breeze. My phone buzzes with an incoming video call, Tiffany, who despite the distance has remained my most steadfast connection to home. How's my favorite rainforest scientist? She greets me, her familiar face slightly pixelated due to the research. Station's temperamental internet connection. Sweaty, bug-bitten, and happier than I've ever been. I replied truthfully, angling the camera to show her the spectacular view from my porch. How did the closing go? Without a hitch, the new owners seemed nice. Young couple, first home, stars in their eyes. I feel a momentary pang remembering how Charles and I had once been that couple, purchasing what we thought would be our forever home. The house had finally sold last week, the last tangible asset binding us together. The proceeds had been divided according to the divorce settlement Patrick had negotiated. Fair, but favorable to me given Charles's documented financial improprieties. That's good, I say, and mean it. It's better knowing a new family will make memories there. Tiffany studies me through the screen. You really are okay, aren't you? Not just saying it to make me stop worrying. I smile, recognizing the genuine concern behind her question. I really am. It's not the life I planned, but it's becoming the life I never knew I wanted. After the confrontation at the lake house, the practical dissolution of my marriage had proceeded with surprising efficiency. Charles, perhaps recognizing the indefensibility of his position, had offered minimal resistance to my demands. The paternity test had confirmed what everyone already knew. He was indeed the father of Kayla's child. A daughter, I learned, born in late November and named Ella. I sometimes wonder about that child, an innocent participant in her parents' complicated narrative. What story will she be told about her origins? Will Charles prove a better father than he was a husband? These questions arise occasionally, but without the sharp sting they might once have carried. Oh, I almost forgot, Tiffany continues, pulling me from my thoughts. Audrey called yesterday. She and Claude are considering a vacation in Costa Rica this spring. She wanted to know if it would be awkward to visit you while they're here. The mention of the Morgans brings a smile to my face. True to her word, Audrey had maintained our relationship despite the divorce, calling regularly and sending care packages to my remote research station. Claude too had reached out in his more reserved fashion, sending thoughtful emails and once, to my surprise, a field guide to Costa Rican birds with personal annotations in his meticulous handwriting. Tell her I'd love to see them, I respond without hesitation. The guest quarters here are basic but comfortable. They could stay a few days if they want the full rainforest experience. After finishing the call, I prepare for the day ahead field. Work with my research team, collecting data on how climate change is affecting flowering patterns and tropical ecosystems. The position with Dr. Ramirez has evolved over the past year, growing from a 6-month contract to a full research fellowship with teaching responsibilities at the affiliated university. My phone chimes with an email notification. Patrick Reynolds, sending confirmation that the final paperwork has been processed. I am officially Abigail Kent again, having reclaimed my maiden name along with my independent identity. As I gather my equipment, I reflect on the strange, painful journey that led me here. Had Charles never betrayed me, I would likely still be in our suburban home, working my part-time consulting practice, perhaps starting the family we had planned. I would have continued shaping my existence around his career, his needs, his dreams, not out of coercion, but out of the belief that compromise was the cornerstone of marriage. His deception, devastating as it was, forced me to reimagine my life entirely on my own terms. The research I'm conducting now contributes meaningfully to conservation science. The papers I've published over the past year have drawn attention from international environmental organizations. The students I mentor bring fresh perspectives to ecological challenges I've pondered for years. None of this would have materialized had I remained Abigail Morgan, defined primarily by my relationship to Charles. As I step onto the forest trail, equipment bag slung over my shoulder, I remember something Audrey said during one of our calls. Sometimes the worst moment of your life becomes the doorway to the best chapter. I couldn't see it then, standing in that hotel room the morning after the reunion, overwhelmed by grief and uncertainty. But looking back from the vantage point of a year's journey, I recognized the truth in her words. The path I walk now, both literally through this magnificent rainforest and figuratively through my reclaimed life, may not be the one I had planned, but it is undeniably mine. Each step takes me further from the woman who discovered a hidden necklace and closer to the woman I was always meant to become. Up next, thanks for watching, take care, good luck.
After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. **